Hi, I'm Joe Connolly, and today our guest on these videos is to tell us something about an industry that we have not looked into on these videos yet, cyber security. And Bob Strang is a former FBI and DEA agent who has now started his own cybersecurity and security consulting firm. And Bob, I bet that when your calling card says ex-FBI and former DEA agent, that might open some doors for you to get in on some sales calls.
Well, yeah, you would think so, right?
You would think so.
Yeah, but you know, most of our business comes from referrals. It's interesting because that's the nature of the business. You know, they want people that they can trust. Usually when we get calls, it's people with really severe problems that need help. So that's it's kind of a closed industry in a way.
Right, so you've gone from a career based on tips to one based on leads.
That's well said. Yeah.
So what are most of your phone calls now asking you to do?
You know, it ranges, and you know, it's a big transition when you come from the government into the private sector. It's a big transition, but most of the time there's a theft in a company. Most of the time there might be something to do with sexual harassment, workplace violence. Very often it may just be due diligence when someone's buying a new company in another country and they want to know more about it. It could be just somebody who's traveling and needs security on their trip. We're like a private FBI. That's how people look at us, and that's how we're formed. And we have people all over the world that work for us as subcontractors. So even though we have a home base in New York, the work is all over the world. Now, the thing that's changed, the big thing, Joe, is that almost all the investigations that we do now involve some type of cybersecurity. Because every time there is an internal investigation, whether it be a Foreign Corrupt Practices Act violation by a major corporation or a sexual harassment case that we're seeing all over now, it all involves some type of cyber investigation, something to look at digital forensics. You can't do anything internally or externally without having a record of what transpired.
This sounds like a great, limitless business. Are you hiring? Are you growing?
Absolutely. The industry is growing. I talk to a lot of young people that are going to college and ask me specifically, you know, what should the major be, you know, to get into this growing industry. If you look around the world with what's happening in China and Russia, with all this we're seeing with Hillary's emails, with all of what's going on with Russia, this is a big industry. No one's solved it yet. You know, there's nothing out there that's 100% foolproof. Any of us who communicate on the internet are vulnerable.
Do you advertise at all, or do you not
at all.
Any way? No, nothing.
Nothing.
So isn't that interesting?
It is. It's a referral business. You've got to remember, we're usually hired by audit committees of boards of directors, by the CEO, and it's usually a very sensitive, important matter. And these things, you know, are referred by other CEOs, other members of their community. They're not going to look at an advertisement. They're not going to look in the Wall Street Journal even for an ad. They're going to want a recommendation from someone who's used the firm before, that's satisfied with the work that they've done.
Do you have to turn down business sometimes because of demand?
No, we don't turn business down because of demand. Because remember, the way that we built the business is that we have a core group of people that work with subcontractors who are former agents and experts all around the world. So we have hundreds of guys and women, because my partner in the firm is a woman, a former agent and police officer, that all around the world that are ready to go. So it's a unique business that you can grow and you can scale up and scale back when necessary. You know, I used to say, if someone was going to build a business, this is a good model to do it, because you're not going to get too far ahead of yourself. You can handle those big jobs internationally or domestically when they come up. And it's a lot of fun to do it.
You know, I'm just thinking from a business point of view, what a sales pitch. I mean, if I needed your services, you just had me ready to ask, where do I sign the contract? In less than 30 seconds. When you started talking about, I have a network of former FBI agents all over the world, the sale was made.
Yeah. It's a unique situation, isn't it?
I would think so. It must be wonderful.
But there are other firms like mine, other men and women who've left government, whether it be military intelligence or working for Department of Defense, NSA, that have started businesses similar to ours. You know, some of them have a different niche, but nonetheless, there's a lot of mid-sized firms like ours across the country.
What advice do you have to those in a profession similar to yours, or maybe even other professions, if they are interested, if they dream of someday starting their own business? What advice do you have?
You know, it's pretty straightforward. I say that most people, you know, that I talk to, even now when agents talk to me that from the government that would like to start their own business, I say, look, you know, start something if you can first. Get a client or two, do some consulting work, get a sense for it, start to build up the business. But they have to understand that in the private sector is not the government. You need a business plan. You have to have some capital to get going. It's very different. You know, in the government, we don't work really with a budget. We work to arrest bad guys. And it's endless. I need 15 people. I need so much money. I need a wiretap. We get the money, right, from Congress. When you're running a business, you really have to focus on the business side of the business. And you have to make sure that you've got the clients, you've got to make sure that you've got the cash flow, and you've got to, you know, grow that business very carefully.
And you also don't have the authority to bark orders at clients and say, this is what we're going to do because I said so.
That's right, that's right. But that's true in government, too. I mean, you can't bark orders all the time because you're working with U.S. attorneys. That's how I met Giuliani, right? All that work we did in Wall Street and the Lower East Side, that was when, in the late 1980s, mid-1980s. And, you know, so even in the government, you had to be, you know, you can't always bark the orders. Sometimes there's different entities. The Department of Justice may be working with another federal agency like Treasury. You may have different jurisdictions and other countries involved. So I did learn from the government and working with DEA, you know, how to be able to negotiate and make things work and be practical. And that helps us in the private sector.
And were you thinking of starting your own business when you were early in the FBI or the DEA? Was this always in the back of your mind?
Never, never. I love my job. You know, if I had a trust fund, I'd probably still be there. In other words, if I had enough money, I just loved the job. I just thought being, especially, you know, working in the FBI headquarters was very interesting, a lot of fun. Being a DEA agent in the field, traveling, working on these international cases, learning new cultures and meeting people all over the world, it was terribly exciting.
Were you in cars looking behind you to see if somebody was tailing you? And did you kick doors in with your feet?
Both. Yes, I did. And I was one of the, I did often have to look in my rearview mirror going home at night. And I didn't necessarily kick the door, but I was the one with the shotgun, first one in. I was a shotgun qualified, they called it. So on search warrants, you know, somebody would kick the door. You don't kick the door with the shotgun in your hand because God knows what could happen. Right.
That's why they have training.
Yes.
That's why I'm not out on that call. So what is an average day like for you now?
You know, it's very exciting. I've met, you know, the people that I've met, the accomplished people around our corporate structure in the U.S., around the world. It's been amazing. You know, we grew this business when we left 27 years ago. We sold it in 2001 to a public company. We restarted our business, same management team, in 2003. And we've been blessed because we've got such great clients, wonderful, interesting people, and sometimes, you know, people that are in trouble. Sometimes it's, you know, well-known individuals that we read about in the newspaper that we're trying to help behind the scenes as best we can, working with their PR people, working with their lawyers, working with their psychiatrists.
We often end these interviews by asking, where do you go to from here? What's next for you in your business?
Yeah. So, as you know, the business is growing tremendously. I think that from our perspective, there's a lot of competition out there. I think we want to be able to keep the space that we're in, where it's kind of a unique, smaller firm that is dealing specifically with high-level investigations within corporations or for wealthy families. And that's kind of where we want to be. Now, does that mean that someday we're not going to want to extend that to some degree? Perhaps. But, you know, it's interesting. You can either stay where you are and have a good, solid business with a nice profit, enjoy what you do, and that's kind of where we are. So
I totally understand it, right? You have a worldwide network of former FBI agents. You're a small business, relatively in a niche. What's the need, right?
Right.
And we don't hear that story very often, but I hear it occasionally.
Right.
This is fine.
Yeah, this is fine. And the other part is, your listeners, your viewers are going to think, you don't always have to think about being a public company. I mean, if you can build a solid company and you get to the point where you have a nice income, you have no debt, you have good people and good clients, the quality of life becomes pretty good.
That's great. Bob, it's great to know you.
Joe, thank you so much.
Keep getting the bad guys for the government or for your clients. Just get them.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks.